More Canadians than ever are calling Nomad Capitalist and are moving overseas to go to places that have lower taxes, are more free, and are more safe. And today I'm going to walk you through some of their thought processes and talk about some of the best places that they're going. As we always say here at Nomad Capitalist, there is no universal best. So what I want to do today is walk you through the thought process and some of the particular places that stand out where Canadians are moving. This could also apply to Americans or Australians or others who are used to a Western standard of living, who want to leave their country now because they realize they're paying too much, they're not getting enough in return, and their country is heading in the wrong direction. Now, if it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consultancy that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally reduce their taxes overseas, protect their assets, and build their options with things like second passports and diversified portfolios. I'm also the host of the biggest and best offshore conference called Nomad Capitalist Live. And so let me start with some things to consider if you are coming from Canada. And again, similar thought process could apply to someone from the US, Australia, New Zealand, what have you. One of the big things is assessing your priorities: taxes and finances, freedom and lifestyle. What are your biggest concerns? Are you concerned in Canada about, I'm worried my assets are going to be frozen? Or are you worried about my taxes are too high, I'm paying a lot? Are you worried about your freedom? What particular freedoms are you worried about? And are you trying to build a bigger lifestyle? That could mean getting away from certain cultural issues in Canada or the US. It could mean just building a better lifestyle somewhere that's warmer. It could mean having an adventure. So you can take tax, freedom, and lifestyle in different ways, but you've got to assess what's best for you, because I think that one of the things when it comes to deciding what's the best place for you is assessing those priorities. For example, you've seen a lot of people, and when I was in Mexico on a couple occasions last year, ran into a lot of our fans who were there seeking more freedom. The country was more open, the lifestyle's great, the weather's great, the food is some of the best food in the world. I mean, they have a great freedom and lifestyle benefits by being in Mexico. Now, on the tax side, is Mexico the best place to live? Mexico, there's certainly some nuance to Mexico's tax code. But if you're going to live in Mexico full time, that may not be your number one tax place to live. Certainly not everyone who's living in Mexico is paying taxes. Some of them perhaps should be. Some of them may have an argument why they don't need to be. But especially if you're leaving a high tax country like Canada, and especially if you're running a business or have certain investments, depending on what those investments are, there's many factors, and we're not giving tax advice, but there may be some reasons why Mexico wouldn't be the best fit for you. But if you say, okay, you know what, freedom and a great lifestyle, that could also mean lower cost of living if that's important to you, then Mexico may score very highly, and you could figure out the tax stuff secondarily. You may pay more than you would need to somewhere else, but if the idea of Mexico versus Panama, for example, Panama is generally speaking more expensive because it's a dollarized economy. It's an interesting place. There's certainly things going on there, but I don't think it's as vibrant as Mexico, for example. I think Mexico is a bit more open in recent years. It was a bit easier to get into at times. And so, Panama's tax policies are going to be more straightforward, more beneficial for a foreign entrepreneur or investor. But you've got to decide, which am I prioritizing? And so once you establish those priorities, you can start to look at what are the other factors that go into those decisions. One big thing that I'm hearing a lot about, especially from entrepreneurs, are time zones. Some investors too, hey, I've got to trade the market. If I move to Asia, that's not the best place for me because I don't want to start working at 9:30 at night and work till 4 in the morning. Maybe some people, invest in Asian stocks. I certainly have friends who did that living in the United States, and they said now they live in Asia, and not only do they get to see what's going on in Asia and perhaps use that to influence their investment decisions, but now they're at least on the right time zone. But if you're investing in Western markets or North American markets, if you're doing business with North American clients, certainly you might want to consider that. When I spend time in Asia, I generally get a little bit later start. I have our first team members that start around 1 in the afternoon that I'm talking to, going up to about midnight. And I may be working till 1 or 2 in the morning sometime. If you have any kind of business in North America, and you've lived in Asia, that's how it works. And so if time zones are important to you, if that's where your business is, if that's where your clients are, if that's where your investments are, then you may want a little bit closer. Some people also, when they're leaving Western countries that have certain conveniences, they feel a certain comfort saying, I have those rental properties back in Canada. I have those rental properties in the US. I don't want to be too far away. It's a sort of a safety blanket, but I think it's a fair thing to take into account when you're first moving overseas, is give yourself that safety blanket. Don't be too harsh on yourself and say, I only want a strategic plan. When I'm working with folks, our entire team knows it's human plus strategic. The human element has to be considered because just because Malaysia may be the best strategic place for you, if you don't feel comfortable there, you're not going to do it, or you're not going to keep doing it. And so rather than having you save taxes for a year and then move back, why not just look at a place that has the similar attributes of Malaysia? What's the second best choice that suits the more human element? And so time zones are one. Physical proximity to business, knowing that, like, hey, if I had to get back on a plane, we've worked with a lot more brick and mortar business owners in recent years who want a plan B and they want to get out of Canada, for example, right? Maybe you say, hey, if the manager of my factory, if everything falls apart, I want to know I can get back, and it makes me feel comfortable that it's a nonstop 5-hour flight more than I have to stop, one or two airports along the way, and it's 22 hours. Keep that in mind. I think that's valuable. Another thing is proximity to family. So are you taking care of elderly family? I've always said, number one, bring your family with you. They might get better medical care. They might get cheaper medical care at a discount. What I've seen from a lot of people in Canada and a lot of people all around the world is we don't tell our parents, we don't tell our family about this because they don't agree with us. All of our concerns about where the country's going, they don't get it. Or I've had people where it's like, oh, we grew up in a very middle class family. We're the first ones to become millionaires. And they are like, why don't you just pay? Well, Mom, because you're paying $4,000 a year and I'm paying $400,000 a year. It starts to feel like I'm not getting what I'm paying for. And so a lot of people that I talk to, that's why people come to Nomad Capitalist Live, to meet hundreds of like-minded people, our live conference. But you want to, if you do have family, if you do have friends, if you can't bring them with you, or if they don't want to come with you, or if they don't agree with you, the more they don't agree with you, maybe you just say, listen, this is not a relationship that needs to be nurtured more. At a certain point, maybe you say, people are really arguing with their families sometimes. I want to go overseas and they're berating them. Maybe that's not a supportive relationship. But if you want to be close, again, give yourself that comfort. Give yourself that human element that, hey, maybe you take the second or third most strategic decision. And again, for a lot of folks from Canada and from the US, they're looking at Latin America precisely because of that. Now, let's talk about the last element and then get into some specifics. Development and consumer conveniences. I have a home in Bogota, Colombia. I spent a little bit of time there. There is Amazon Prime. It's relatively efficient. It's not quite to the standard of the US because a lot of the stuff comes from the US and it's shipped. They have a pretty fast shipping system, but it's not same day, it's not next day. It is affordable and you can get free shipping. Obviously, countries in Western Europe have that. I guess Singapore probably has that. And then in countries like Malaysia, you have services like Lazada, Zalora. Different regions have, in Colombia and parts of South America, there's Rappi. Not nearly as good. I think Lazada in Southeast Asia is not nearly as good. If you're looking for that Amazon level convenience, then that's something to consider. So development and consumer conveniences. We're going to go back to tax, freedom, and lifestyle. One place that we've seen some wealthy folks from Canada and the US live, some of them came directly from there, others had lived in the Cayman Islands and other places that they felt were becoming less free. They moved to Nicaragua. Now, it was interesting because I was talking to someone recently from Canada and they said, isn't that run by dictators? I said, did you mean Canada or Nicaragua? Nicaragua, I've been there, not a very developed place. There's some beautiful parts of San Juan del Sur, if you like surfing, northern Nicaragua, Leon, Chinandega, that can work for you. So you've got a lot of the benefits. By the way, you've got some very organic foods. You go and have just great fish tacos at a local street market. It is definitely more laid back. If you are looking for the Cayman Islands lifestyle, you're not going to find it in Nicaragua. You're going to be basically left alone. You're probably not going to be quite as safe as you would be in many other places. I think you can find safety anywhere. You could live in a gated community. You could live in an oceanfront, community with expats. Certainly there are places like that in a lot of places in Latin America where you can be in the kind of community behind the locked door, if that's what you want. But that's the kind of an example of a decision that someone might need to make is, do I want to have kind of the ultimate of freedom plus tax, plus warmer weather? Am I willing to give up development? Am I willing to give up a little bit of safety? Certainly Latin America, I believe, can be plenty safe. I think, the capital cities of Central America, Panama City excluded, are definitely less safe, from Guatemala all the way on down to Costa Rica. So if you're me and you want a city, Central America is not going to be your place. If you consider Mexico City, Central America, if you consider Panama City, Central America, you would. then those can be good. But if you live in Costa Rica, understand Costa Rica, which does have tax incentives, at least for the moment being, is good weather, is a relatively straightforward residence permit, does have great beaches, does have a great expat culture. I mean, you're not going to be in a city. And so Latin America is popular, but depending on where you want to be, you may have to give up city living, you may have to give up some consumer conveniences, or you may have to be a little bit more adventurous, right? Go down to South America, you can go to Uruguay, and they have a great tax incentive, and I think it's pretty safe. It's also relatively boring. It's also a lot further away from the US and Canada, from pretty much anywhere, quite frankly. I mean, by the time you're flying to Montevideo and you're driving to Punta del Este or wherever you're living, I mean, you could get to like Eastern Europe by that point. I mean, it's really not any further. Argentina, not that different. I mean, Chile, tax incentives, but that's far away as well, and you're going to not have as much freedom there. So a lot of South America is good if you live there part-time. But if you're going to live in Colombia full-time, you're going to have crazy taxes to deal with. Not a bad place to live part-time, but you live there full-time, and you're going to be paying. And so if taxes aren't important, I would also argue tax compliance is an issue, right? How long does it take you to do the work? But if you don't care about taxes, if you want freedom and lifestyle, I mean, Colombia, like many Latin American countries, they say certain things and people don't do it, and the lifestyle's good. You can live an affordable life. You have to decide. So that's what Latin America is. Western Europe, a lot of folks from Canada, the US, they think, well, that's not going to be any more free. What do you have in Western Europe? You have countries that are surprisingly tax-friendly, whether it's Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Switzerland, even the UK. We've had some folks who've gotten UK citizenship by descent, even double descent through grandparents, and we've helped people do that, and then you can live in those countries. If you happen to be a UK citizen by descent, you may not qualify for the tax incentives. There may be a way to do it. But anyway, plenty of countries in Western Europe where you can get good tax rates. Obviously, the quality of life is good. There's plenty of services. There's plenty of developments. Listen, plenty of good roads in Mexico, plenty of good roads in Colombia. If you're going out into the countryside, the roads do start to fall apart in some countries. But there are roads everywhere. Maybe they're a little bit better in Western Europe. Tax-friendly is good, lots of services. The continent is reopening, but I think some people think, the European Union, that's not the most free place in the world. I think it may be a little bit more free than Canada or Australia. Australia, where they won't let their own citizens into the country. I do think that Europe, potentially in some ways, I mean, a lot of those countries do score much higher on not having corruption, to where they do in some ways at least try and work for the citizenry more than you might find in the US or Canada. But it's not the ultimate in freedom. So the question is, Latin America versus Western Europe, for example, am I willing to live in a place that does have some more regulations that are actually applied in order to have the greater quality of life? Maybe I'll live in one of those tax-friendly countries where I can have a very low tax rate. I don't suggest that anyone moves to France. If you want to move to Eastern Europe, that's certainly an option. We've had a lot of folks from Canada and Australia moving to Serbia, moving to Montenegro, moving to Georgia. Those countries either have very friendly tax policies for foreigners, or they have very flexible tax codes that can be made tax-friendly for foreigners. So that can work as well. But listen, you are going to have more services available to you in Dublin. You are going to have, obviously, more English spoken in Dublin than you are in Belgrade. Pretty good English in Belgrade, quite frankly, compared to Tbilisi. Not as good of English, right? So am I willing to go somewhere like a Tbilisi, Georgia, where the tax policy is great, the immigration policy is straightforward? Heck, you can live as a tourist for 360 days, 0 to 1% tax rate, wide open, organic food, healthy, pretty much back to normal. Or do I want those greater creature comforts? And I think the answer in finding your best place is, again, prioritize tax freedom and lifestyle, which is most important. There are some options where you can find all three, but it's never quite perfect. You have to understand what you're giving up. And to understand what you're willing to give up, you have to understand what you're gaining. Dramatically lowering your taxes is possible, protecting your assets. You don't have to move to protect your assets. You can move the assets, but if you want to move and protect your assets, maybe that's an indication you shouldn't be there anymore. You can certainly find more freedom. You can certainly find a better lifestyle, better weather, more consumer conveniences, nicer people, better relationships, what have you. But which is number one? Because you're always going to get something that's missing. Asia, by the way, slower to reopen. For most folks who are asking this question, where should I go? Along with the time zones, along with the proximity, Asia just isn't as popular right now. If you just want to get away from everybody and you don't care about that stuff, then Asia could be interesting. We've always talked about Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand. Those are places that are starting to reopen. But it's Latin America, Western Europe, and Eastern Europe, and each comes with its own benefits. And so if you assess those priorities, that's important. And then if you realize what are the actual safety blankets, what are the safety blankets that you want in your life? Do you want good English? A country like Belize in Central America, Ireland, the UK, those are places where you can go. And obviously, you have English right out of the box, right? If you speak Spanish, or you're willing to learn Spanish before you go, obviously that opens up a number of countries. That said, Spanish spoken in Uruguay, not nearly as easy to understand as in Colombia, which is not as easy to understand as in Mexico, for example, where they probably speak more of an Americanized or North Americanized way. And so those are the things that you've got to ask yourself. What am I compromising, and what do I really need in my life? I would always put the human element in any plan when I'm working with folks, because understanding I just want to speak English is an important piece of self-awareness that will help you make the decision, because the goal is not to sprint. The goal is a marathon. The goal is to find a place where you want and to at least dip your toe in. And if you live in Ireland for the next 5 years and you save some money and you build a lifestyle there, and then you start poking around and you discover, you know what, now we're ready for Serbia. Now we're ready for Montenegro. Now we're ready for whatever the next place is. Nothing wrong with that. You can do that. But I think that the risk is if you find a place that you're being a little bit too aggressive, you're going to go back too quickly. You might lose the tax benefits that you got. Certainly you wouldn't get any future tax benefits. You would go back to a place where maybe you don't agree with the country, you don't like the freedom. So be a little gentle on yourself when finding the best place for you, and that's the criteria that I would use to do it.